Today, let's talk about whether the Franco-German sixth-generation fighter jet can continue. The latest news is that Germany has decided to terminate cooperation with France on their sixth-generation fighter project, FCAS. Germany will likely team up with Spain, but Spain has only designed small transport aircraft before and has no experience designing fighter jets. So, currently, Germany might also bring in Sweden. If there are problems in various aspects, Germany might join the sixth-generation fighter project of the UK, Italy, and Japan. The FCAS project, jointly developed by France and Germany, was actually launched in 2017 by then-Chancellor Merkel and French President Macron. Their aim was to create a relatively unified fighter jet for Europe. At that time, the euro was dominated by Germany, and Germany wanted to achieve a unified Europe. A unified Europe would require the establishment of a European army. Germany made significant efforts during the Merkel era, even integrating the Dutch army into the German army. Therefore, together with France, they wanted to initiate the FCAS project. Airbus Defence and Space, Germany, and Dassault Aviation France jointly developed the so-called sixth-generation fighter. In reality, the Franco-German sixth-generation fighter project is more of a political signal than about the aircraft's advanced capabilities. Currently, the aircraft is planned to be a twin-engine, medium-thrust fighter. Although the medium-thrust engines for the Franco-German next-generation fighter have significantly increased thrust compared to current ones, reaching about 110 kilonewtons, the overall thrust limitations mean the maximum weight of this so-called sixth-generation fighter won't be too high. While sixth-generation fighters may not prioritize maneuverability as much as previous generations, a certain level is still necessary. For fighter jets, the performance related to launching positions on the battlefield remains crucial. The maximum takeoff weight of the Franco-German aircraft is estimated to be around 34 to 35 tons. Compared to the American F-35 and China's J-35, the weight increase is not significant. The maximum takeoff weight of the American F-35 is 32 tons. China's J-35, the Air Force version, is around 30 tons, and the naval version is personally estimated to be about 32 tons. So currently, this Franco-German aircraft has a weight similar to medium-sized fifth-generation fighters from China and the US. In terms of aerodynamic layout, the so-called sixth-generation fighter jointly developed by France and Germany does not show particularly revolutionary changes compared to fifth-generation fighters. It closely resembles the design proposed by McDonnell Douglas in the 1,990 seconds in the US, featuring a lambda wing and rear V-tail. In terms of system architecture, it doesn't really align with the concept of a sixth-generation fighter. Furthermore, the avionics level of France and Germany is quite average, with a significant gap compared to China and the US. During the Cold War, France's avionics level was similar to that of the Soviet Union, not much more advanced. Soviet Cold War aircraft like the Su-27 and MiG-29 used inverted cardin radar, and France's Mirage 2000 also used inverted cardin radar. It wasn't until after the 1,990 seconds that France's planar slot array radar entered service. If the Soviet Union hadn't collapsed, its planar slot array radar would have also entered service in the early 1,990 seconds. Moreover, compared to the Soviet Union, France's engine technology was even worse. A clear example is the M53 engine used on the Mirage 2000, which entered service in the 1,980 seconds. The M53 is one of the few turbofan engines in the world that uses a single spool design. What is a single spool? Engines we see today, even turbojets like China's WP7 and WP13, are dual spool. In a dual spool design, the low-pressure compressor and high-pressure compressor are on different shafts and rotate at different speeds, allowing the engine to perform better. Due to limited technical capability, France adopted an engine structure similar to the Junkers Jumo 004 engine, used on the German World War II Me 262, still using a single spool where the low-pressure and high-pressure compressors share the same shaft and rotate at the same speed. This resulted in French turbofan engines having a relatively high bypass ratio, but fuel consumption similar to or even higher than turbojet engines. This indicates France's limited technical capabilities. This also includes the Rafale fighter developed by France after the Cold War. The M88 engine used on this fighter has a core design copied from General Electric's scheme, not truly developed by France itself. For the M88 engine, France only developed the low-pressure compressor and low-pressure turbine. Its high-pressure compressor, combustion chamber, and high-pressure turbine were copied from the US. This resulted in a relative mismatch between the low-pressure and high-pressure compressors of the M88. Consequently, the M88's performance is among the lowest for third-generation medium-thrust engines. Superficially, its specifications seem higher than Russia's RD-33, but actually, the RD-33 was finalized much earlier than the M88. The RD-33 is inferior to the M88 in terms of engine materials, but in terms of structural design, the Russian RD-33 engine is far superior to the M88. Moreover, although the Rafale appears to sell well on the international market, it has only produced about 300 aircraft over 25 years, from 2000 to 2025. In comparison, China's J-10A, which entered service later than the Rafale around 2004 to 2005, saw its numbers exceed 300 inches less than 10 years before mass production of the J-10B began after 2012. The total production of the J-10 series has now exceeded 800 aircraft. Over the same period, Rafale production is actually less than half that of the J-10. We can see that the number of Rafales delivered by France annually is not very high. France is currently striving to increase the Rafale's annual production to 24 aircraft. The current total orders for the Rafale stand at 495 aircraft. This order number is much smaller than that of the J-10, whose total production has exceeded 800 units. If the J-10 secures new export orders in the future, it will challenge the 1,000 unit mark. The low production volume of the Rafale makes it very expensive, and its iteration speed is not fast due to the small production scale. In terms of avionics level among 4, 5th-generation fighters, the Rafale and the Eurofighter Typhoon, jointly developed by the UK, Italy, and Spain, are actually at the bottom level, inferior to their Chinese and American counterparts. The primary reason for their considerable sales is that French fighters face fewer restrictions, and the US suppresses Russian fighter exports, allowing the Rafale and Typhoon to survive in a niche market. Even so, the total production of the Rafale is still less than that of the Eurofighter Typhoon. This is because the Typhoon has relatively wealthier countries like the UK, Italy, Germany, and Spain purchasing it. Of the Rafale's 400-plus orders, over 200 are for the French Air Force and Navy, with the rest relying on exports. Countries that purchase the Rafale are typically those seeking relative political independence and wanting to avoid strict US control. For France to develop a next-generation fighter, securing sponsors is crucial, with both Germany and Spain withdrawing from the FCAS program, and Belgium, which previously had observer status in the Franco-German 6th-generation fighter program, also having withdrawn. Would be very difficult for France to support the development of a next-generation fighter alone. Because for 6th-generation or next-generation fighters, it's about a family of systems concept, not just developing one type of fighter. Even for 5th-generation fighters, they need to operate in conjunction with various UAVs. For example, the US F-35 is progressing towards its Block 4 version and is testing various cooperative schemes with UAVs. France's technical capabilities are relatively limited in this regard. France launched the Neuron project around the same time as China's GJ-11 Gongji-11. However, apart from its flying wing aerodynamic layout, the Neuron project has a low level of intelligence, and it has essentially been stillborn. For other UAVs that could cooperate with fighter aircraft, France lacks both funding and technology. Therefore, if France develops a 6th-generation fighter alone, even if it manages to develop the aircraft, the most optimistic estimate is that its avionics level might only reach that of the US F-35 Block 4 around 2030, or the level of China's current J-35. This would essentially be France's ceiling. If its so-called 6th-generation fighter lacks supporting UAVs, its survivability on the battlefield would be relatively low. Furthermore, early versions of the Rafale could only fire air-to-air missiles and could not launch cruise missiles or even drop laser-guided bombs. It wasn't until the Rafale F2 standard, the second batch, that it gained the capability to drop laser-guided bombs. France's current goal is for its 6th-generation fighter project to enter service around 2035 or 2040. Under these circumstances, a fighter jet introduced to the market in 2035 or 2040 that cannot operate cooperatively with UAVs or even launch cruise missiles would have very poor selling points. If it can only fire air-to-air missiles, then currently, if Germany withdraws, this French sixth-generation fighter project basically cannot survive. Moreover, a key reason why the Franco-German sixth-generation fighter project is unsustainable is that Dassault has been somewhat unreasonable, failing to consider the political perspective. The key reason Germany and France decided to jointly develop the next-generation fighter was their political foundation, not necessarily complementing each other's strengths. Initially, Germany and France shared funding 50-50. Regarding project responsibility, Germany made some concessions, with 60% of the design work assigned to Dassault. This was, of course, because Dassault has much stronger fighter design capabilities compared to Germany. However, after Merkel left office, with the new German leadership, Macron felt he could dominate Germany. Thus, regarding the next-generation fighter, France made an outrageous proposal. France would only contribute 50% of the funds but demanded 80% control of the project, especially the prime contractor role being given to France. This meant the aircraft's design and all subcontractors would be decided by France. Effectively, the fighter would be entirely designed by France, with only some very minor, peripheral parts of the project given to Germany and Spain. Germany certainly couldn't accept this. Therefore, Germany's newly appointed chancellor implied. Olaf Scholz withdrew from the project. Germany is not a fool, especially with the rise of the Alternative for Germany, AfD party. Such a selling out the country behavior would certainly not be agreed to by Germany. Furthermore, Germany has started importing American F-35 fighters again. As mentioned earlier, the ceiling for the so-called Franco-German sixth-generation fighter is only about the F-35 Block 4 level. Perhaps the version they eventually field might not even reach F-35 Block 4 level, maybe only the current F-35 Block 3 level. We previously saw the model and thought the project had started, but in reality, even today, the Franco-German project is still coordinating divisions of labor. The entire project hasn't even started yet. Therefore, the model of the so-called next-generation fighter displayed at airshows is questionable regarding its final form. So, it's normal for Germany to purchase F-35 seconds. Initially, Germany's excuse for buying F-35 seconds was to replace the aging Tornado fleet's nuclear strike capability. But recently, Germany purchased another batch of F-35 seconds, which are standard versions, not specifically the nuclear-capable variant. Also, we can see that although the current F-35 does not yet have operational cooperative capabilities with UAVs, it is at least experimenting with various UAV cooperation schemes. As for France and Germany, France has no decent UAVs to speak of. Its current UAVs are just models at airshows or CG animations and PPTs. Germany is slightly better. They have built a one-to-one model. At the 2024 Berlin Air Show, Germany unveiled a stealth UAV. This stealth UAV is quite large, with a length over 14 meters and a wingspan of about 12 meters. It has an internal weapons bay and can carry relatively small diameter cruise missiles and air-to-air missiles. Its engine is the EJ200, jointly developed by the UK and Germany. The EJ200 engine is often perceived as a British engine, but in fact, its low-pressure compressor and low-pressure turbine were developed by Germany. If you check its official website carefully, it states that MTU, a German engine company known mainly for diesel engines internationally, collaborated with British Rolls-Royce on this engine. So Germany has made significant contributions to this engine and does have some foundation in aero engines, at least in the low-pressure section cold-end equipment. However, in the joint development of the next-generation fighter, France wanted to take everything, insisting that the entire engine scheme be determined solely by France. Given that France's own engine design level is not great, even their civil engine high-pressure section relies on General Electric, Germany was certainly unwilling to accept this. Looking at Germany's designed stealth UAV, it has a notable feature. Its EOTS electro-optical targeting system is mounted on the top of the nose, not underneath. The key reason is that while the aircraft looks stealthy, its actual stealth level is probably average. It is intended to enter the battlefield at low altitude, where targets are generally above it, so it looks upwards. This reflects a realistic assessment by Germany of its own stealth technology capabilities. In contrast, China's stealth UAVs and manned aircraft, like the J-20 and J-35, have their EOTS systems mounted under the nose. These aircraft typically enter the battlefield from high altitude, looking downwards, which indicates great confidence in their stealth capabilities. And this is also a major reason why Germany designed it this way, due to their lack of confidence in their fighters' capabilities. If Germany, the major financial backer, withdraws from the FCAS project, it will essentially be stillborn. Consequently, the Rafale fighter will likely become the last fighter jet designed by France. The Rafale will essentially mark the end of France's fighter jet lineage.